Hi, this is Birds and I'm Ren. If you love birds like me, then stick around. Today we're looking at a bird you've definitely seen, but probably never really looked at, the starling. The common starling, Sturnus vulgaris, is one of those birds that gets dismissed as ordinary. Black, noisy, everywhere, a city bird, a car park bird, just background noise. Except starlings aren't black, and they're not ordinary, and if you actually pay attention, they're one of the most interesting birds Europe has to offer. Let's start with what they look like, because most people get this wrong. Starlings aren't black. In breeding plumage, they're iridescent, glossy purple and green with bronze highlights that shift depending on the light. Each feather is tipped with a small buff or white spot, giving them a speckled appearance. By spring, those spots wear off and the birds look sleeker and darker. The bill changes too, dull and dark in the winter and bright yellow by breeding season. Outside of breeding plumage, particularly in autumn and winter, starlings are heavily spotted. Juveniles are plain brown-grey, and it takes a full molt before they develop the adult's metallic sheen. If you've only ever glanced at a starling from a distance, then you've probably missed all of this. Starlings are medium-sized songbirds, about 20 to 30 centimetres long, stocky, with short wings and pointed tails. Nope. Starlings are medium-sized songbirds around 20 to 32 centimetres long, stocky with short tails and pointed wings. They're built for direct, fast flight, and they are strong flyers. They move with purpose, quick, decisive and efficient. On the ground, they walk rather than hop, which is unusual for a songbird. They stride across lawns, car parks and pavements, probing the ground with slightly open bills, searching for invertebrates. The probing technique is specific. Starlings insert their bills into the soil or grass and then open it up forcefully, creating a gap which they can see into. This is called gapping, and it lets them access foods other birds can't reach. Their diet's broad. Invertebrates that include beetles, earthworms, leather jackets, spiders. That makes up the bulk of their diet, particularly during breeding season. But starlings are also opportunists. They'll eat fruit and seeds, scraps, anything else that's available. In autumn and winter, berries become important, and starlings will strip bushes and hedges really efficiently. They're also vocal, constantly. Starlings have a really complex repertoire of clicks, whistles, rattles and warbles. The song is a jumbled, energetic mix of sounds delivered rapidly, often high on a perch or roof. But what makes starlings particularly interesting is their ability to mimic. Starlings are excellent mimics. They can copy other birds, such as curlews, oystercatchers, and they copy also mechanical sounds. Car alarms, they can do mobile phone ringtones, trucks reversing, alarm clocks. There are also recorded examples of starlings mimicking human speech and chainsaws and even the sound of a camera shutter. And this isn't occasional, it's common. If you hear a bird making a sound that doesn't quite fit in, there's a decent chance that it's a starling mimicking. This isn't fully understood, but it's thought to play a role in mate attraction and individual recognition. Males with a larger and more varied song repertoire may have a reproductive advantage. Males that can mimicry and demonstrate learning abilities can also be a signal for fitness. Starlings are social birds. Outside the breeding season, they gather in flocks, sometimes small, sometimes enormous. Roosting flocks can number tens of thousands of birds, and during the day, feeding flocks can move across open fields, through parks, and in urban areas in coordinated groups. And this brings us to something fantastic, their murmurations. Murmurations are one of the most striking visual behaviours in the natural world. In autumn and winter, usually in the hour or so just before dusk, when starlings gather in really large numbers before roosting, the flock, in its murmuration, moves as a single fluid shape, twisting, rolling and expanding and contracting and flowing across the sky like liquid. This isn't choreographed. There's no leader. Each bird responds to the movements of its nearest neighbour, and the result is a collective behaviour that looks intentional but emerges from simple rules applied by thousands of individuals simultaneously. A real cohesion. Murmurations serve a function though. Coordinated movements confuse predators, particularly prey birds like sparrowhawks and peregrines, making it much harder to single out and catch an individual starling. The larger the flock, the safer each bird is, and murmurations are thought to encourage more birds to join the roost, increasing collective safety. They're just so spectacular to watch. Starlings are found across much of Europe, from Iceland and Scandinavia, south to the Mediterranean and east to Central Asia. Their present starlings are largely resident in the west and migratory in the north and east. Birds breeding in Scandinavia and Eastern Europe move south and west in autumn, often travelling to the UK, France and Iberian Peninsula for the winter. British breeding starlings may stay put or move shorter distances. This creates a complex picture of where local populations mix with migrants and winter flocks that contain birds from multiple regions. Starlings are adaptable and they live in cities, towns, farmlands, parks, gardens and open countryside. They only need two things for their survival: short grass or bare ground for feeding and cavities for nesting. As long as these are both present, starlings can establish themselves. It's this adaptability that's made them successful but also controversial. In the late 19th century, starlings were deliberately introduced to North America. The story goes that a group called the American Acclimatization Society wanted to introduce every bird mentioned in Shakespeare's plays to Central Park, New York. In 1890 and 1891, around 100 starlings were released. Those 100 birds now total over 200 million birds. Starlings spread across the entire continent, from Alaska to Mexico, becoming one of the most numerous birds in North America. They compete with native species for nest sites, particularly cavity nesting birds like bluebirds and woodpeckers. They're considered an invasive species, and their success in North America is a textbook example about human meditated introductions that can have massive and unintended parts of Western Europe. The reasons are complex. They range from changes in farming practices, loss of permanent pasture, reduced invertebrate abundance, and fewer nest sites in modern buildings, all of which are said to play a role. Despite this decline, starlings remain common and widespread. They're not threatened globally, but the trajectory is worth paying attention to. By spring, when breeding begins, starlings shift back to individual territories. That's where the next section picks up. Starlings begin breeding in spring, with timing varying by region. In much of Europe, activity starts in April, though in milder areas it may begin earlier. Pair formation happens quickly. Starlings are socially monogamous for the breeding season, though extra pair mating does occur. Males establish territory, which is usually centred around a nest site, rather than a defended area of land. Once a male has his site, he advertises it. Males sing from prominent perches near the nest cavity. They sing from rooftops and branches, TV areas, aerials, just anywhere that's visible. Their song's loud, varied and persistent. It includes the bird's own songs, repertoire of whistles and clicks, and mixed in with mimicked sounds. The more complex the song, the more attractive the male is to females. Nest sites are cavities. Starlings don't excavate their own holes. They use existing cavities in trees, buildings, nest boxes and cliffs. In urban and suburban areas, roof spaces work well. Wall cavities and gaps under eaves are commonly used. Starlings are aggressive about defending nest sites, and they will compete with other cavity nesting species, and often successfully. Once a female has selected her male and the nest site, both birds begin building. The nest is loose. The structure is made from grass, twigs, moss, feathers, and other recovered materials stuffed into the cavity. It's not particularly neat, but it's functional. Egg laying typically begins late April or May. Starlings lay 4 to 6 eggs. They're pale blue and unmarked. Eggs are laid daily, and once the clutch is complete, incubation begins. The incubation period lasts 12 to 15 days and is shared between both adults. Though the female does more of it, during this time the male continues to sing and may begin preparing for a second nest site if conditions are good. When the chicks hatch, they are atrial, naked, blind, and entirely dependent on adults for warmth and food. Both parents will feed the chicks, and they do so intensively. Starlings will bring food to their chicks in the form of invertebrates, earthworms, beetles, caterpillars, spiders, all collected from lawns and fields and their other feeding areas. Adults often forage in groups during this period, and feeding trips are really frequent. Chicks are fed continuously from early morning until evening. Their growth is rapid. Within a week, chicks develop down and begin to show first signs of feathering. Eyes will open after several days. By 2 weeks, they're well feathered and active inside the nest, begging loudly whenever adults approach. The fledgling period happens around 20 to 22 days after hatching, and it's not gradual. Young starlings leave the nest abruptly, often in the morning, and once they're out, They do not return. Fledglings are fully feathered but still depend on adults for food. They follow their parents begging constantly and are fed for another week or 2 after leaving the nest. During this time, they learn to forage and gradually become independent. This is a very vulnerable period. Young starlings are really conspicuous and relatively clumsy. Predation from cats, birds of prey and other predators are common. Also, weather matters. Cold, wet conditions increase mortality, particularly if the insect abundance drops. If conditions are good, starlings often attempt a second brood. This typically happens in June or early July. The male may already have a second nest site prepared. The pair will move directly to the second breeding attempt once the first brood is independent. Second broods are common in starlings, and this high reproductive output helps offset losses and contributes to the population's stability. By late summer, juveniles begin to form flocks. These flocks are often separate from the adult flocks initially, consisting of young birds from multiple broods. As autumn approaches, these groups merge with the adults and starlings begin to gather in larger numbers. This is when the behaviour shifts again. Territorial aggression disappears and the songs reduce. The focus moves towards feeding and survival as daylight shortens, temperatures drop and food is in scarcer supply. In wintering areas, starlings form large mixed. For northern and eastern population, This is when migration begins. Birds leave breeding areas in September and October, moving south and west towards wintering grounds. Some travel hundreds of kilometres, others remain relatively local. In wintering areas, starlings form large mixed flocks. Residents and migrants feed together during the day and roost together at night. Roosting sites are used repeatedly, sometimes for decades, and can hold tens of thousands of birds. These roosts are noisy, messy, and spectacular. Birds arrive in waves during the late afternoon and early evening, often forming murmurations before dropping into the roost. Once settled, the noise is constant, a chaotic mix of calls and wing beats. Roosts provide safety. Large numbers make it harder for predators to target individuals, and collective warmth in dense roosts help birds survive the cold nights. But large roosts also attract predators. Sparrowhawks and peregrine falcons hunt around starling roosts, and their arrival and departure times are when starlings are most vulnerable. By late winter, the cycle begins again. Migrants start moving back north, resident birds begin claiming nest sites, their songs increase, and breeding starts. Starlings move fast, their breeding season is short, and their reproductive output is high, and their ability to exploit variable conditions is what makes them so successful. But with success, this comes with a cost, and this is where the next section picks up. Starlings are adaptable, opportunistic, and successful, but their relationship with humans is complicated, and their long-term prospects are uncertain. In Europe, starling populations have declined significantly over recent decades. In the UK, breeding numbers have dropped by more than 80% since the 1970s. Similar declines have been recorded in other parts of Western Europe, and the species is now red listed in the UK, meaning it's a conservation priority. The reasons for this decline is complex. Changes in agricultural practices are a major factor. Permanent pasture, grasslands that's left unploughed for years, has been replaced by intensive arable farming in many areas, and starlings depend on short grass and bare soil for feeding. And this loss of pasture reduces their foraging habitat. Increased use of pesticides also reduces invertebrate abundance, which directly affects a starling's food supply. Modern buildings provide fewer nest sites also. Older buildings with their gaps and cavities and accessible roof spaces are being renovated or replaced with tightly sealed and energy-efficient structures that leave no room for starlings to build their nests, as they can no longer access these areas. The gradual loss of suitable sites affects breeding success. Despite these declines, starlings remain common and widespread across much of Europe. They're not disappearing, they're just adjusting. Urban populations are often more stable than rural ones. Starlings continue to thrive in cities, towns, and parks where feeding and nesting opportunities remain available. In contrast, the contrast with North America is striking. There, starlings are considered invasive and are often actively discouraged. Their success in competing with native species for nesting sites has led to widespread hostility, and starlings are one of the few birds in North America that is not protected by law. This highlights a broader tension. Starlings are native to Europe, where they are declining and are legally protected. They're non-native in North America, where they're abundant and considered pests. Same species, two different contexts, two completely different conservation statuses. Globally, starlings are not threatened. The species is widespread, adaptable, and capable of exploiting a wide range of habitats. but regional declines matter, and the trajectory in parts of Europe is concerning. What starlings need is straightforward: access to invertebrate-rich feeding areas and suitable nest sites. Gardens, parks, urban green spaces can provide both, particularly if managed with wildlife in mind. Leaving areas of lawn unmowed, reducing pesticide use, and providing nest boxes will all help. Starlings also need us to pay attention. It's easy to dismiss them as common, noisy, unremarkable. But common doesn't mean secure, and abundance can disappear faster than people expect. Starlings are still here, but they're not guaranteed to stay that way. That's harder to quantify. What's harder to quantify is what we lose when starlings decline. Murmurations are one of the most accessible and spectacular wildlife experiences available in Europe. They happen in cities, towns, countryside, and they're free. They don't require specialist knowledge or equipment. You just need to be in the right place at the right time and look up. And yet, in areas where starling numbers have crashed, murmurations have disappeared. Roosting sites that once held tens of thousands of birds now only hold hundreds or none at all. The loss is gradual, and for people who don't remember what it used to be like, it's invisible. Starlings are also part of the urban soundscape. Their mimicry, their constant chatter, their presence on rooftops and in gardens. All of this contributes to the character of a place. When starlings vanish, that changes. Beyond the spectacular and the sound, starlings play a functional role. They consume a large number of invertebrates, including agricultural pests like leather jackets, which damage crops and grass. They disperse seeds. They're part of the food web, supporting predators like peregrine falcons or sparrowhawks. Starlings fit into the landscape. They don't dominate them, but their presence matters. If you want to see a murmuration, late autumn and winter are the best times. Look for large open areas near roosts, over reed beds or piers, bridges, large buildings, on the edge of town squares. Arrive about an hour before sunset and watch the sky. If the starlings are there, you'll know. If you want to help starlings, the actions are small but effective. All you have to do is leave an area of lawn rough, reduce pesticide use, provide a nesting box with a 45mm entrance hole, plant berry-bearing shrubs and trees, and support farming practices that maintain permanent pasture and hedgerows. Starlings don't need special conservation programs. They need the everyday landscape to remain functional for them. By late winter, starlings are back in breeding mode. The song increases and male claims their nest sites. Pairs form and another generation begins. Whether you're watching a murmuration over a city square, hearing a starling mimic a car alarm from your rooftop, or just notice one passing across a car park, you're seeing a bird that's more interesting than it looks. A small bird, big personality, who's severely underrated. That's it for this episode of Birds. If you enjoyed spending time with this bird, you can find more episodes wherever you usually listen. I'm Ren. Thanks for listening.